It's July 16th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with Donald Trump officially being nominated as a 2024 Republican nominee. Trump has officially become the Republican nominee 2 days after he survived an assassination attempt at his campaign rally in Pennsylvania. The former president picked the Senator of Ohio, J.D. Vance, to be his running mate and vice president. And U.S. stocks hit new records to kick off the week as investors raised their wagers that Trump will win the November election. The positive response on Wall Street also came with Fed Chair Jerome Powell's remarks that suggest a rate cut may not be far off. Majority of doctors who have walked away from their duties over government medical admission quota expansion did not return to work on Monday, which was the final deadline that the government designated to process their resignations. Donald Trump on Monday was officially nominated as the Republican Party's presidential candidate. He also chose Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential running mate. Our Lee starts us off.
Donald Trump has been officially nominated as the Republican Party's presidential candidate at the Republican National Convention. During the first day of the convention in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on Monday, the former U.S. president secured the nomination for this year's election, receiving a majority of votes from the 2,400 delegates. After an acceptance speech on the final day of the convention on Thursday, Trump would then be in place for a possible rerun of the 2020 election against Joe Biden on November 5th, although the incumbent president is facing increasing pressure from within his party not to run. Trump also announced his running mate on Monday, selecting Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential pick. The 39-year-old who once said he was an anti-Trump Republican has since become Trump's supporter. Following the nomination, U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas on Monday announced that security measures for Trump have been increased in response to Saturday's shooting incident. Mayorkas also indicated that an independent investigation would address security concerns surrounding the assassination attempt. Despite an injury to his right ear sustained in the shooting, the former president is continuing his presidential campaign as scheduled. On Monday, it was also reported that Trump's criminal case over the mishandling of classified documents had been dismissed. A Trump-appointed U.S. district judge in Florida ruled that the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith, who filed the indictment against Trump, was unlawful. However, Smith's team indicated that they would appeal to the decision. Lee, Arirang News.
On the first day of trading on Wall Street since the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, Wall Street closed with record highs. Now, more bets on a Trump victory in the November election played a significant role. Lee has more.
It was feared that the weekend assassination attempt on U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump would bring uncertainty to the U.S. financial market. However, Wall Street responded with a record-high close for the Dow Jones and S&P 500 indexes. The Dow Jones closed up 210.82 points, or 0.53% from the previous trading session, to end Monday's trading session at a fresh record high of 40,211.72. The S&P 500, which has seen all-time highs being shattered regularly throughout the year, saw yet another record high, finishing the day at 5,631.22, up 15.87 points, or 0.28% from the previous trading session. Monday's trading also saw a number of stocks linked to Trump or his policies jump. Trump Media, the parent company of social networking service Truth Social, soared 31.4%, while Tesla, whose CEO Elon Musk has openly expressed his support for Trump, also closed up 1.8%. Energy-related stocks like ExxonMobil and Chevron and the health insurance stocks like United Health rose due to expectations of deregulation following a possible Trump re-election. The market expectation is that if Trump does win the November U.S. presidential election, he will strengthen trade barriers, expand tax cuts, and ease regulations related to cryptocurrency and climate change responses. Meanwhile, Wall Street also responded positively to the increasing prospects of a September rate cut. U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell at an event at the Economic Club of Washington on Monday said that U.S. inflation data over the second quarter of this year added somewhat to confidence that the economy is on pace to reach the central bank's target inflation of 2%. While Powell did not directly mention a September rate cut, his comments suggest such a decision may not be far off. 이승재, Arirang News.
A war of nerves continues between the two Koreas over the sending of waste-carrying balloons and propaganda leaflets over the border. The North now releases photos showing items from the South being burned. What are the North's intentions? We're joined by Stephen Norper, President of Asia Dialogue. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Dami. Nice to be back.
South Korea's unification ministry said Monday that it was very unusual that North Korea released these photos showing, burning leaflets sent from the South. What does it mean by unusual? Why is the North releasing these photos?
Well, they want to show that they're creating a direct response to the interception of them. And that message is really aimed at South Korea and the South Korean groups that are doing that, as opposed to trying to inform the North Korean public per se. Hence, they didn't broadcast that widely among North Koreans themselves, whom they may not want to know have such things exist. So this is part of the propaganda back and forth, and tensions are high when it comes to that rhetoric now.
But the thing is, the photos weren't published in the North state-run newspaper, the Dodong-sinmun, which ordinary people in the North have access to. Why is that? Why is the North not releasing those photos everywhere?
Well, most likely because they don't want North Koreans to be looking for or find these. By printing them, they would be acknowledging that they exist, whereas the anger is really targeted towards the ROK groups that are sending these, some with DPRK defectors. And so the North is trying to show its anger at this in a way where they are lighting them and expressing verbally their strong opposition to these continuing.
Right, because at the end of the day, those waste-carrying balloons or propaganda leaflets do serve propaganda purposes. And on top of that, the North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, made a statement warning of further retaliation against Seoul. What kind of retaliatory acts can we expect from the North? I mean, more leaflets, more balloons? What do you think?
Well, you're likely to see both. You're likely to see the balloon activity continue. It's an irritant to South Korea, and it irritates the public authorities, and it does force them to issue warnings to the South Korean public. So that's an irritant. But beyond that irritant and the war of words, there are other points that the North Koreans are raising, especially in opposition to the nuclear pact between the United States and South Korea and the coordinated activity and upcoming exercises among the United States, South Korea, and Japan. And so North Korea is trying to register its disdain for this and present a clear opposition. What it reminds us is that this rhetoric can get heated. We have to be careful not to take it overboard, and that we need to try to cool the tone a bit, to lower the volume, as it were, so that we don't lead to provocations or some sort of continued crossings at the border, things that would raise tensions and lead to an escalatory effect.
Definitely. But the question is, why does the North continue to choose to send these waste-carrying balloons? I mean, is this because it's the easiest way to tick South Korea off? Why the balloons?
Well, that's essentially it. I mean, it is an irritant. It's foul. It's base. They know that it bothers South Koreans, and so they continue to push. It's also low cost, and it's effective in creating an irritant. But clearly, we need to get back to a position where we're calmer in tone, where we don't overreact to these or overplay them, and in that way reward North Korea's propaganda effort. So it's important to keep a measured response.
Does that mean a possibility of missile provocations cannot be ruled out?
No, clearly there will be some activity that may be designed around the military exercises taking place among the trilateral partners. They're unhappy about the ship that has docked in South Korea. They're unhappy about this nuclear enhancement, and they're looking for excuses to express that. It also, from their perspective, creates a rationale for their nuclear development. So we need to be careful on all those fronts. It's important that we create lines of communication and that we get UN and foreign missions back in Pyongyang so that we have every available contact, in that inter-Korean contacts are very poor right now. So we need those lines of communication to prevent a skyrocketing in the rhetoric and a skyrocketing in the risk. We need to limit that risk, and to do so, opening other forms of communication would be helpful, and getting back to negotiating tables ultimately is what we're looking for.
Indeed, and the Unification Ministry spokesperson reiterated the government's long position to take necessary steps that the North would find hard to endure. Now, what kind of steps? I mean, does that mean more propaganda broadcasts from South Korea?
It may mean that, in terms of heightened broadcast and a return to that sort of activity, which is loud and disruptive. But it may also lead to further coordination, of course, with the United States and Japan in terms of contingencies. We've seen that with this nuclear compact. And it will create, again, a firmer reaction. So with the war of words back and forth, it is imperative to tone it down, to soften rhetoric, and to try to seek other partners, be they the United Nations, be they friendly foreign countries. And perhaps South Korea will have to turn to those who are difficult at times, be it China, be it Russia, to try to open those lines of communication with North Korea and create a little bit more of a stable dialogue.
All right, Dr. Norbert, thank you as always for your time and your insights. You have a wonderful day.
Aloha, and thank you.
Monday was the last day for trainee doctors who left their workplaces in protest against the government's medical reform plan to decide either to return to work or resign. And most of them expressed no willingness to return to work. Our Choi Soo-hyung reports.
The majority of trainee doctors did not return to their hospitals on Monday, the due date for a final decision as to whether they will return or resign. Before that, training hospitals sent text messages asking them to provide an answer by Monday noon. According to the Big Five hospitals in Seoul, very few trainee doctors responded. The hospitals have said that if the trainee doctors do not return or respond, their resignations will be processed automatically. The trainee doctors who have refused to return since taking part in a massive walkout against the government's medical reform plan are saying that the medical school admissions quota hike issue has not been fundamentally resolved. According to the government, as of last Thursday, only 69 out of a total of 10,506 trainee doctors in all 211 training hospitals who submitted resignation letters had their resignations accepted. Also, only around 8% of trainee doctors are working at hospitals currently. After the resignations are processed, hospitals will recruit new trainee doctors starting in September, while it's reported that almost none of them are planning to reapply for training positions. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports of information and communication technology products hit a record high for the month of June again, staying on an upward trend for 8 straight months. And solid demand for chips kept the figure strong. Our Lee Soo-jin with details.
Semiconductors once again led the increase in South Korea's tech exports last month. Data released by the Trade Ministry on Monday shows that ICT exports in June reached $21 billion. That's an increase of 31.1% compared to the same time the previous year. It's also the largest ever recorded for the month of June and the third straight month that tech exports have seen an on-year increase of more than 30%. This was driven by outbound shipments of chips also reaching a record high last month. Chip exports surpassed a previous record set in March 2022 on the back of growth in the AI market and a recovery in the sales of IT devices. Memory chip exports were especially high thanks to the increased demand for high-value products like high-bandwidth memory chips. As for other tech exports, displays saw double-digit export growth for the 5th consecutive month, and computers also saw a rise for the 6th straight month. By country, South Korea's exports to China, the nation's biggest destination for ICT exports, saw an on-year increase for the 8th consecutive month in June. Shipments to other nations such as the United States and the European Union also rose, but there was a slump in exports to Japan. Meanwhile, ICT imports last month dropped 5.1% on year due to fewer inbound shipments of chips and rechargeable batteries. As for the first half of the year, ICT exports rose 28.2% to $109 billion, the second largest amount of exports on a 6-month basis. This was also driven by outbound shipments of chips rising nearly 50% on year on the back of strong demand. During the January to June period, other tech exports such as displays and computers saw a double-digit increase compared to the previous year. And exports to China during this period rose more than 37% on year. Imports, on the other hand, fell on year, leading to a trade surplus of $41 billion. 이수진, Arirang News.
South Korea is one step closer to securing its first ever arms deal with the U.S. With its domestically developed Bigung guided missile having successfully passed the final test conducted by the Pentagon. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung has more.
South Korea's Bigung pongpaard guided rocket system has passed the final test needed for potential use in the U.S. The weapon, developed by defense company LIG Next 1 in cooperation with the Agency for Defense Development, was test-fired in waters off Hawaii last Friday on the sidelines of the Rim of the Pacific maritime exercise. LIG Next 1 announced Monday that the Bigungs successfully hit all 6 targets. Friday's test was the last in a series of successful evaluations conducted by the U.S. Defense Department over the past 5 years. It has shown a 100% hit rate in all foreign comparative tests aimed at evaluating whether foreign weapons satisfy valid defense requirements for use in the U.S. The Bigung is a 70mm low-cost guided imaging rocket that can be fired from land, sea, and air. It's known for its cost-effectiveness and ability to accurately hit multiple targets at once. Friday's success marks a significant milestone as it would open the door for exports, representing the first time a complete South Korean-made weapon system is integrated into Washington's arsenal.
Exports would come following a budget approval by the U.S. Congress and a contract procedure after the test launch. We are working on this in many ways.
A day before the launch, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations Admiral Lisa Franchetti visited the South Korean Navy's vessel, the Cheonjabong, where the test launch took place, to take a closer look at the weapon. She said the launch test of Bigung during RIMPAC 2024 marks another advancement in integrating unmanned systems into U.S. naval operations. Commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command Samuel Paparo also showed great interest in the South Korean weapon.
If we're not curious about each other's capabilities, we do each other a tremendous disservice. So of course, I'm interested in this. And if we can find ways to build it either on license from each other, or we find ways to build it on export from each other, if it works and if it's good and if it benefits our alliance, we should do it.
Following the successful test results, South Korea would now have to see if it could clinch its first ever defense export deal with the U.S. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
NATO will open a liaison office in Geneva where UN-affiliated organizations are concentrated. According to a statement from the Swiss government on Monday, it signed an agreement with the military alliance during a ceremony in Bern. The agreement covers the legal status of NATO's Geneva liaison office, the privileges and immunities of its staff. While Switzerland is not a NATO member country, it has been operating a partnership program to strengthen cooperation with the alliance in various fields since last year. NATO is expected to use the office to carry out close cooperation with various UN agencies headquartered in the city, including the UN Human Rights Council and the Conference on Disarmament.
Good morning. I'm Kim Si-young, and this is The World Now. The European Union on Monday announced sanctions against 5 Israeli individuals and 3 entities for what it described as serious and systematic human rights abuses against Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. The EU sanctioned far-right activists Benzi Goldstein and Baruch Mazel. It also sanctioned settler activists Moshe Sharvid, Zviva Yosef and Issachar Man, who each ran or created illegal outposts. The EU also targeted Zav9, an activist group that has attempted to sabotage the delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. Under the EU global human rights sanctions regime, all people listed on Monday are subject to a travel ban to the EU and will have their external assets frozen. All mentioned individuals and entities, except for Marzel, have already been sanctioned by the United States. UNICEF said on Monday that due to an escalation of fighting in Sudan's Sennar state, some 50,000 people displaced by the country's civil war have sought refuge in the town of Qadarif in eastern Sudan, with authorities expecting more to arrive in the coming days. The United Nations said on Thursday that while they set up talks aimed at brokering possible ceasefires to facilitate humanitarian aid and protect civilians, only one of the warring parties showed up. The civil war in Sudan between the National Army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces erupted in April last year over the integration of forces in a transition to democratic elections. The UN estimates that nearly half of Sudan's population, some 25 million, are in need of aid and under threat of a famine, while almost 10 million have been forced to flee their homes. Kenyan police said on Monday that they have arrested a suspected serial killer who confessed to killing 42 women, including his wife. Police said that 33-year-old suspect Collins Jumaisi was arrested after 9 bodies were found at a quarry close to Jumaisi's home in Nairobi. They also found mobile phones and identity cards at the suspect's home, as well as a machete, industrial rubber gloves, sellotape and nylon sacks allegedly used in the murders. According to authorities, Jumaisi confessed to luring and killing the women before dumping their remains at the quarry, adding that the murders began with his wife in 2022, with the most recent killing on the 11th of July. Argentinians celebrated a record 16th Copa America title after beating Colombia in the final of South America's regional football competition. After a goalless 90 minutes, the match went to extra time before Argentina's Inter Milan striker Lautaro Martinez scored the only goal of the game with the 112th minute strike. That goal at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida, gave Argentina a second consecutive Copa America title. Sunday's game also marked the final international appearance of Argentina's 36-year-old Angel Di Maria, who said Copa will be his last international tournament.
Good morning. Chungcheongdo provinces and southern regions are having a rainy Tuesday morning, and heavy monsoon rain that soaked the south coast has moved to the east, downgrading a rain warning to an advisory. More monsoon rain is in the forecast for Jeju through lunchtime, and southern provinces will see rain until late tonight. However, central regions will see monsoon rain arriving this afternoon, pouring down tomorrow at dawn with up to 100 millimeters of downpour is expected. Now, temperature-wise, the capital and Jeju had a tropical night, and western regions are under heat advisories, especially in Gwangju and nearby areas today. Seoul sees a high of 30 degrees Celsius. Daejeon and Gyeongju should see a high of 29 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, heavy monsoon rain is in the forecast tomorrow and Thursday in central parts of the country. It's going to be rain-free on Jeju for the rest of the week, but people there need to brace for searing heat. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.